Into the Danny, April 22nd, 2026. Video number 2 for today. And we're here at the Johnson Square, right across the street, if you can see it, in Savannah, Georgia. And we're going on one of the highest rated ghost tours in Savannah that obviously has a very rich history of haunts and ghost tours and all that. Now, I was going to save this video for my official first Halloween series, which is going to run September 1st to November 1st. It's going to be pretty much 90% Halloween videos and all the haunted stuff that we can get to. 80-90% haunted videos, Halloween themed videos, and so forth. But I just couldn't hold myself. So I decided, yeah, you know what? We're doing a haunt video. We're doing an April haunt video. Now, there's over 30 people on this tour already, but this tour is for 16 and older. It is not for families. They have family tours as well. So if you have any young children, please tell them not to watch this tour. I'm not going to include, obviously, there's no graphic stuff or any of that. So like, subscribe, let's roll. Okay, so we're supposed to meet here at the square at 9 p.m. on Bull Street and Congress. So let me check. Oh, we got a tour group here in front of us. Okay, Bull Street and Congress. So that's this way. We're meeting at the Sundial. I am a little bit early, as usual. It's 8:30, but the sundial. What is a sundial? Okay, I'm guessing all these people are here for the tour. Okay, that's creepy. Is it the lady there in the little gown? Let's go see. I think it's this lady in the gown right here. That's pretty scary. Let me see. Let's see. Oh, that's the sundial right there. Hello.
Hello.
This is the tour at 9 p.m.
Yes. Are you?
Okay, so we're at the right location. Everyone's waiting around, and there we have the creepy bell ringing. I just did like a Haunted Mansion voice. What is this? I can't read it. It's too far. Nathaniel Green. Okay, Nathaniel Green. That's a big tower. Look at that. The Ghosts of Savannah. All right, here's our tour group just waiting here to get going. Here's a look at Johnson Square. Got that building over there, beautiful building. I don't know what it is. Could be City Hall, something like that. But getting ready to go here on the most intense ghost tour in Savannah, Georgia. Okay, we're almost getting started. My tour is called the Dead of Night tour. But if you want a little point of reference, I got a 10% off discount, so it cost me about $34 with tax. It's about $34 per person. And again, this is a 16 and over tour. It's not going to feature anything that, you know, it's too intense to watch, even for you know. But again, if you got kids, just don't let them watch this episode. Okay, here we go. We're off. You know, again, I'm from South Florida, so to me everything is cold. But it is dipping down a little bit, mid to low.
Noticed it all over the place. Well, to get to the bottom of this mystery, we need to go back to Nathaniel's day. Back then, yellow fever was ravishing the city of Savannah, so much so that bodies were being piled along the city streets. And back then, they didn't realize that a simple mosquito bite was to blame. So many interesting and strange theories started popping up, and one of the strangest theories comes from Nathaniel. He believed that the Spanish moss was oozing and dripping that dreaded disease down onto the population below. And he believed this so fervently that he wrote up a petition trying to get the city to tear down all the Spanish moss. that everyone thought he was a little bit crazy for this, and no one actually signed this petition. And in the late 1700s, he passed away, and his body was originally buried over at Colonial Park Cemetery.
So we're still in Johnson Square. This square, if you notice, if you look at the trees, our tour guide, that I think he's a ghost by the way he talks, but besides that, there in that pillar right here is buried Nathaniel Greene, revolutionary captain and right-hand man to George Washington himself. He's buried there. He hated Spanish moss. So when his body was moved here, the moss started to magically and creepily disappear. So like I was trying to say, I was trying to catch up with the group, and I'm definitely not running a 4240 anymore, that's for sure. But so Nathaniel was buried there. He was the right-hand man and posted out here in Savannah, Georgia, to George Washington himself. Now his body, I believe, was moved. Don't quote me on the year because I didn't hear the tour guide very well, because I think he's a ghost. But his body was moved in 1901 to this square, Johnson Square. When it was moved, the Spanish moss began to disappear from the trees. Because if I didn't mention it earlier, Nathaniel Greene hated Spanish moss when he was around the 1700s. So in 1901, it just began to disappear, which is crazy. Okay, we're getting into another square here, Wright Square. So it's got creepy vibes, that's for sure. Thankfully, there's a bunch of tour groups here, and nothing can happen to us. Said hut. All right, let's go. Gordon. Who's Gordon? He was probably friends with Thomas Jefferson. Who knows? All right, there's our tour guide. All right, let's go this way.
Wright Square, also known as the Hanging Square, because this was the site of the Savannah Colony Gallows, right in the center here. And then over here, this large building, that used to be the site of the Savannah Colony Courthouse. And over there, the CVS that we passed, that used to be the very first jailhouse here in Savannah. Now, to me, this all seems like a very efficient system. You were charged over in the courthouse, dragged over to the jailhouse, live out your sentence in those dirty and cramped conditions, with the only form of entertainment being a small window looking out onto the gallows where you were likely to be hanged. Now this brings us to our story of Alice Riley. Alice was a young Irish woman with big dreams of moving to the New World. However, she didn't possess the money capable of procuring her passage, so she did what a lot of other poor Europeans did during that time, and that was to become an indentured servant. An indentured servant is when a wealthy individual from the New World procures your passage for you with the understanding that you would have to work for them until your debt had been paid. Now Alice, she thought this was going to be a really great gig. She thought she'd become a maid or a nanny or a cook or something. However, unfortunately for Alice, she was brought into the service of the terrible Mr. Wise. Now, Mr. Wise, he was hated throughout the entire colony during that time, so much so that he was basically banished over to Hutchinson Island, which y'all can see if you're standing on River Street. That is where his cattle ranch was. That is where Alice would have to work all day long under the hot Savannah sun and under both the verbal and physical abuse of the terrible Mr. Wise. But unfortunately, that was not her worst job. She would also have to bathe Mr. Wise every single night for 2 gruelingly long hours. She would start in the hair, picking out any bugs or lice that were in there, moving on to the beard, coming out any grease or food scraps left over from that day's meals, then moving on to having to scrub that man from head to toe. If that wasn't bad enough, she would also have to sexually pleasure Mr. Wise whenever he saw fit. Now, as you can imagine, this was a terrible situation that Alice found herself in. And well, she found very little solace, except for when she was in the presence of her beloved Richard. Richard was also an indentured servant under the service of the terrible Mr. Wise, and they fell in love because of that shared plight. Now, one day they decided to try and take their fate into their own hands. So they came up with a plan. As Alice was preparing for Mr. Wise's bath, Richard came in to give him his nightly shave. But instead of a shave, he received a razor blade to the throat. He slit that man's throat, allowing the blood to pool out into the bath water, and that's when Alice grabbed his head and dunked him in his own blood, drowning. Now, at the beginning, they thought this was going to be an excellent idea. They would finally be free of the terrible Mr. Wise. But reality soon set in, and they realized that if they were caught, they would surely be hanged. So they panicked, and they rushed out of the house as quickly as they could into the Savannah forest, where, unfortunately for them, they were caught. Not even 2 days later. They were dragged here to Wright Square. And since this was the very first crime of its type to be committed here in the colony, the public demanded swift justice. So they dragged Richard up first, put the noose around his neck, the hangman pulled the lever and hanged. And they were about to do the exact same thing to Alice when she pleaded with them, please don't kill me, I'm pregnant. And yes, she was. So from Richard or from Mr. Wise, it's impossible to know for sure. But the people of Savannah, they weren't all heartless. They believed that the child didn't deserve to die for the sins of the parents, so they allowed Alice to live out her pregnancy in that dirty and cramped jail cell back there. And while she was in there, the people of Savannah began to talk and gossip. And they came to the conclusion that Alice had been infected deep within her soul by some strange, wicked evilness. And that if she was allowed to come into contact with her child for more than just a few moments, then that child would also be infected by that same wicked evilness. So they came up with a plan. They got an old woman from the local church to go into the cell as soon as the child was born and snatch the baby away from her. Yes, they were successful in this. They didn't allow Alice to hear her baby's first cries. They didn't allow Alice to hold her baby in her arms. They didn't allow Alice to name her own child. And once that deed was done, they dragged her back up to the gallows, put the noose around her neck, and asked her, Alice, do you have any final words? And she looked out onto the crowd, out at those bloodthirsty eyes looking back at her, and she said, I curse you, and you, and you, and damn Savannah to hell. Now the crowd, they began to panic at this. So before she could get any further words in, the hangman pulled the lever, and she hanged. And unfortunately, her body refused to die. Her heart kept beating for another 3 days. But on that third day, her heart finally stopped, and they say that her body vanished, as if it was never here to begin with. But that's not the last time we've seen Alice here in this square. She's one of the most sighted ghosts in all of the United States. She'll be seen wandering around this square in broad daylight even. She'll have long red hair and a long white gown, the same gown that she was wearing the day that she was hanged. And she'll go up to people, especially young and expecting mothers. She'll say, can you please help me find my baby? I'm missing my baby. And these people, they'll be so concerned for her and her child's well-being that they'll call up the police, file a missing child report. Police get so many of these calls for Wright Square that they just send their rookies. Once they know that once they arrive, Alice will be long gone. Now, a few years after Alice was hanging, the colony of Savannah tore down the gallows here in Wright Square, but the people of Savannah still thought of this as the hanging square. They just got the biggest and sturdiest oak tree that they could find, and that became their lynching tree.
Okay, so you heard the story. Now we're going to some demon tree that people have, you heard them, have reported seeing this woman at night here. They've called the police and everything. and she disappears. So we're going now to some demon tree that they see orbs and stuff, and yeah, look at it. It's right here. Hold on one second. So this tree is where a lot of people were hanged throughout the 18th century, throughout the 19th century, and people take pictures of it, and supposedly there's orbs and things like that come out on the picture, but who knows. I'm gonna take a picture. Okay guys, I'm walking up to the tree. I'm not gonna touch it, but I'll show it. They say if you touch it, you can get sick and all, scratches and all this and that. So if you see any ghosts, point them out, please. Maybe in the trees, maybe. Let's go up here. If you see anything in the trees, please comment below. There's the demon tree. Again, many people were hanged here. The guide basically said that after people take pictures here, a lot of times they report seeing orbs in the picture. They start getting scratches, like itchy, sick, all kinds of stuff. So again, if you see any ghosts, please point it out in the comments. You never know. Let's go up in the tree. And supposedly there's a rope hanging up there. I don't see it. I don't see any rope up there. If you guys happen to spot the rope, let me know. But I don't see it. This guy was pointing it out with us here. He was pointing out the rope. I don't see the rope. So I didn't touch the tree. No way. It's just not worth it. You never know, right? Okay, so now I don't know where we're walking to. I guess to another square. But it's getting creepy. This guy's got all the info on the squares. If you've ever been to Savannah, it's filled with squares. They are beautiful though. But once you realize there's been a ton of, horrific things happen in these squares, it kind of takes away from the beauty. But I think this is the Forrest Gump square. Yeah, it is. Chippewa Square. Yeah, the original square we were at, Johnson Square, where we met, he said that 25,000 bodies are buried there. But it's a pretty park.
Throughout the United States. However, she rejected each and every one of them. Because although Mr. and Mrs. Foley were extremely wealthy, their relationship was built on much more than just money. They were also extremely in love with one another. So much so that she refused to be called anything other than Mrs. Foley. And sometimes at night she could be seen through her window speaking to the portrait of her dead husband as if he had never died. Now eventually she came to realize that if she was going to stay in that house all alone for very much longer, that she would go insane. So she decided to convert her home into a boarding house. Now in order to do so, she needed to make some renovations. So she hired the labor of a local brick mason named Charles. And Charles, he came over. He worked diligently for months on end, and by the end of it, it was perfect. It was exactly what Mrs. Foley had asked him to do, so she went to pay him. Charles, he refused the payment, saying that over the course of these months working for you, Mrs. Foley, I have fallen deeply in love with you. And this is a labor of my life. Which I think we can all agree that the guy's got some pretty good game. Well, Mrs. Foley certainly thought so, because they entered into a very loving and passionate relationship with one another. However, that ring was still not on her finger, so she was still technically an eligible bachelorette. Now, this is around the time when Mr. Walter, or Wally as I like to call him, he came down from New York City, and he was from a very wealthy and prominent family from up there, and he came down here with one goal in mind, and that was to gain the hand of Mrs. Foley and marry. But the first thing that he did when he arrived here in Savannah was to do like many people arriving in Savannah for the first time like to do, and that is to go hit up a local bar. And at this bar, he drank and he got incredibly wasted, so much so they ended up proclaiming to that entire place that he was going to go over to Mrs. Foley's house that night to propose. Now, everyone in the bar thought he was absolutely insane for this. There's just no way that Mrs. Foley would accept such a drunken proposal. But of course, he was undeterred by this information, and he stumbled out of the bar and onto Mrs. Foley's doorstep. He started banging on her door and screaming out her name, waking up all of her neighbors in the process. And poor Mrs. Foley just thought someone was in dire need of immediate attention, so she rushed down the stairs as quickly as she could, opened the door, and in stumbled Wally. He got down on one knee and proceeded to propose, to which she obviously said no. Well, this sent Wally into a drunken rage. He started acting like a wild animal, slamming his fists down on the center table in the lobby and knocking things from her shelves. And this carried on for a few more minutes before Mrs. Foley was able to muster up all the strength that she could, and she managed to push him out of the door and lock it behind him. Now, he stayed out there for a few more minutes, banging on her door and screaming out her name. But eventually he got tired and he left. Well, now the coast was clear. Mrs. Foley felt like she was safe, so she went back upstairs to bed. But that night, in the middle of the night, she was awoken by an extremely heavy pressure on her chest, and since it was pitch dark in that room, she could not see her assailant, so she grabbed the closest thing that she could get her hands on, a solid silver candlestick sitting on her bedside table. She grabbed that candlestick and brought it down as hard as she could onto her assailant, hearing the terrible crack of the contact, and then a few moments later, a giant thud on the bedroom floor. She got up as quickly as she could, scrounged around for a match, and when she lit it, she found Wally lying dead right in front of her. Well, you see, now she really started to panic, because if this was ever discovered, her entire reputation would have been ruined. At worst, if they didn't believe her as to what had happened, she could have very likely been hanged. So she did the only thing that she could think of to do, and that was to go get Charles for help. So Charles, he came over. He worked diligently throughout the night. And in the morning, Wally was gone, never to be seen again. However, 2 days later, the police came knocking on Mrs. Foley's door because, if you remember, Wally had proclaimed to that entire bar that he was going to go over to Mrs. Foley's house the night that he disappeared. So Mrs. Foley, she was very gracious. She invited the police in, answered any questions that they had. She even suggested that they search the entire house. And they did. They searched it. They searched it high and low, but they came up empty-handed. No Wally. So they cleared her name. Her and Charles, they got married, and they moved to Macon, Georgia, and they lived happily ever after. It's a good end. Now, fast forward 80 years, and the Foley house and the White House next to it were purchased together in an effort to create the modern-day Foley House Inn. But in order to do so, they needed to destroy a center connecting wall between the two. And when they did, out popped a diamond ring, a solid silver candlestick, and the dead and decaying corpse of Wally. Now you know why I like to call him Wally. Apparently, Charles
He's
had
like
put
Norm
up 2 layers
Macdonald.
of plaster, shoved Wally's body into it, then put up 2 layers of brick, making sure to cover up all those creases that could emit that death and decaying smell. And then he went ahead and he aged the outer layer of the brick to make it look like it had always been there. Ever since the disturbance of Wally's tomb, many strange things have been going on in the Foley House Inn. For starters, that center table in the lobby will begin to shake furiously, Wally's fist still angry all these years later being rejected. And guests of the Foley House Inn, women especially, have reported seeing a dark and ominous presence lurking in the corners of their rooms late at night. and in extreme cases they have also reported feeling that exact same pressure that Mrs. Foley felt, only to be abated by that crack of the candlestick, and then a few moments later the giant thud on the bedroom floor. And it's still an inn, so you can stay there if you like.
So that's been the best story so far. They literally found Wally. They found his body 80 years later in the wall. And by the way, it's still, that brick building right over there is still an inn. I would never stay there. But now we're going over to the reason why Savannah is considered the most haunted city in the United States. More than New Orleans, more than Charlotte. The first reason he stated that is to be true is because of the sheer amount of bodies that are buried in Savannah. But now we're going to be going to the statue, or the bronze statue, of the man that's responsible for, Savannah. One of the chief reasons why Savannah is so haunted.
Savannah's haunted. James Oglethorpe, the original founder and colonizer of Savannah back in 1733. Those of you who are movie fans might recognize James from the back of his head because it was featured in the famous bench scene in the Forrest Gump film. However, unfortunately, you can no longer go and visit the bench in its original location back there because people kept trying to steal it. The last people who tried to steal it brought their big pickup truck and a giant chain, wrapped it around the bench, and attempted to drive off. The bench was put into the Telfair Museum for safekeeping, so if y'all want to visit the bench, you'll have to go there during the day. But back to James. He was actually a very unique colonizer of his time because, well, he did a few things differently. The first thing that he did was to design the famous layout of the colony of Savannah before he set foot in the New World. And once he did arrive here, he banned a few things. He banned liquor. He banned slavery. And just because he didn't like them very much, and because he didn't think anyone would dare try to commit a crime in his little idyllic colony of Savannah anyway, he banned all lawyers. But I think the most important thing that he did as the leader of Savannah was to befriend the local Yamacraw tribe, and particularly their leader Tamachichi. And because of this friendship, Savannah was able to thrive economically because they weren't bogged down by all the bloodshed and war that the other colonies were during that time. But just like all friendships, they too had their dirty little secrets. Tamachichi was saving his very juiciest one for last because on his deathbed he invited James over and he told him that very first street that you built, Bay Street, it's actually built on top of an ancient Yamacraw burial ground. And as we know, if you build on top of any sort of ancient burial ground, that the spirits are very likely to rise up and haunt the surrounding area. So as you can see, Savannah has been haunted since its very inception. And our next stop is one of its most famous haunted houses, the Sorrel Weed House. But before we go, I do have a few words of warning. This next stop deals with many adult themes. Some guests in the past have been uncomfortable by it. But if y'all are ready and brave enough.
So this guy behind me, Oglethorpe, he basically found Savannah. I believe he also founded, if I read earlier on my other vlog, he founded Georgia, the entire state. So, shit. All right, just the camera. Yeah, I almost fell again, twisted my ankle. Melissa's like, look forward. So, again, no, I didn't twist my ankle, thankfully. But yeah, so the next place we're going to now has a lot of adult themes. He says that a lot of other guests, the tour guide says that they've become uncomfortable with it sometimes. So again, I'm not going to film it. I'll film the location, but I'm not going to film what he says. I'll give you a PG version of it. All right. And down these creepy streets with a super nice BMW just parked there. Oh, English style pub. Interesting. All right. Oh, it's a cool pub, right? Got another cool restaurant here called the Public Kitchen and Bar. Smells like they make pizza or Italian food for sure. Alright. Yep. Pasta, risotto. Yeah, see? The Public. Alright, so we keep on going. Got a lot of cool restaurants here, man. This is called Artillery. This is a literal bar. A lot of bars in this city. Look at that bar. It's pretty cool, right? Alright, let's keep it going. Artillery. Alright, we're going on another square, guys. We're getting a tour of every square in Savannah, I think. Yeah. It's funny that when you buy the tour, they don't tell you that you're just going to see squares. But I mean, it's cool because he's at least pointing out houses and homes that are haunted. So, kind of happy with that. So basically, this was a place that a crime occurred to a child, and a young, 12, 13, 14-year-old, and basically she haunts it. And you can actually stay here for a night and see if you capture any ghosts or any sort of signs. Down here, the man that built this house was a trauma surgeon, and he would perform trauma surgery down there. My group's going, so I got to go watch the ledge. Don't trip, Danny. He would perform surgeries down there. A lot of the people that have stayed in the house, and also the show Ghost Hunters has stayed in there. Ghost Adventures, excuse me. So if you know the Travel Channel, all of my 35-year-olds or older, if you know the Travel Channel show Ghost Adventures, actually a good show back in the days. I used to like it myself. They stayed there for a night, and they were able to capture EVP. So it's just basically energy that's captured on a device. So again, and supposedly on the device it said, "Y'all get out of here, y'all get out of here," which means y'all in the South means multiple people, according to the tour guide. If it was in Miami, it would have been, "Oye, sal de mi casa, por favor." Look, sorry. I know I'm pretty dark right now, but I feel like I'm the guy in the horror movie that's like, there's nothing happening here. Yeah, I got a YouTube channel. Yeah, well, so what? And bam, I'm the first one to get it. All right, now we're going the way to the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist. And of course, we have another bar in front of us. If you ever want to live in a city with a lot of bars, live in Savannah. All right, and it's funny how differently they're all themed. It's actually pretty cool. Like this one you can tell is, like a throwback, 80s kind of bar. It's definitely busy in there. All right, let's keep it going. Look at this house. Holy smokes. By the way, the houses that you're seeing are in the millions, just so you know. It's a very, very pricey area. He also mentioned that see pretty cool? See how cool these houses are? Look at that little brownstone, you go up there, right? He also mentioned that the last square that we were at is the Forrest Gump square. It's a square where Forrest Gump, in the beginning of the movie, he's sitting. It's the box of chocolates bench. It's very, very famous. They had to move the bench because people kept trying to steal it, according to the tour guide. The last guy that tried to do it got a truck and tied a chain around it, tried to steal it, didn't work. So they moved it to a museum. Wow, look at this cathedral. Absolutely stunning. Look at this. Wow. Incredible. Beautiful cathedral. My God, look at this thing.
Except for the Holy Ghost. But if y'all want to follow me over to our next stop, the cemetery.
Look at this cathedral, how beautiful it is. It's a Catholic cathedral. Built in the 1800s. And he said there's no ghost that haunts this cathedral, only the Holy Ghost. That's right. Let's go. Alright. Going over another square. It really was a beautiful cathedral, let me tell you. Catholic cathedral. All right, here we go. There's less cars and less cars as time goes. It gets later in the night. Ooh, all right. This thing scared the you know what out of me. Right, okay. All right. God, the worst sidewalks in America. All right, here we go. So we are now going over to a cemetery, I believe. So here we go. Walk over. I know it's dark. But let's see what this guy has to say. There's the cemetery out there. Out there, that light is the cemetery.
Park Cemetery. It was an active burial ground between the years 1750 and 1853. However, they had to close it down for the dead because every time they tried to dig a new grave, they would find that a body was already resting in that location. So they had to close it down for the dead, but it was still open to the living to walk through 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That is until around 25 years ago, when a man was drinking his morning cup of coffee on the other side of the street when he spotted something out of the corner of his eye sticking out of the fence here that made him drop his coffee all over the ground and rush over to see what it was. And what he had found was a dead goat. Its throat had been slit, its head was nearly decapitated, and its body had been drained of all of its blood. Now, horrified by this, but equally as curious, he decided to search the surrounding area to see if he could find anything else. And, well, he did. He found a dead rooster that had been killed in the exact same way. Throat was slit and its body had been drained of all of its blood. Now, next to the rooster was a small blood trail, and when he followed it, he came across a large clay pot. And in the pot was the blood of the goat, the blood of the rooster, a bit of grave dirt, a snake head, and some snake skin. Now, as a Savannah local, he recognized what this was immediately, and he called the cops on it because what he had found was a wanga, which is a voodoo ritual meant to summon Loa, which are voodoo deities, specifically those of Papa Legba, who is the intermediary between the human and the spirit realm, and Baron Samdi, who is the protector of cemeteries. And when these two are summoned, they are charged with one task, one goal. And that is to collect as many living human souls from the cemetery that night as possible to take back with them to the spirit realm. So as you can see, it's really in our best interest that the city of Savannah lock down the gates here at night. But if y'all will follow me over to the side of the cemetery, I'll tell you a bit more about what makes this place so strange.
Guys, the tour guide wanted me to mention that he also, besides doing this, he does babysitting. No, I'm kidding. But they didn't want to do it. I need to call the guy. I need to talk to the day. And he's saying, why? I'll call you back, okay?
Now, the reason for all of this is that the cemetery used to be much, much larger than it is today. It used to go an entire 3 blocks further that way, an entire 3 blocks further that way, and an entire 3 blocks further that way. So really, we have been inside the cemetery ever since we left Liberty Street back there. Now, the reason that they shrunk the cemetery was to make way for all this modern infrastructure. However, they just left those dead bodies resting right underneath our feet. And if I could draw your attention down to the sidewalk itself, you will find these bricks. These bricks are unique. You won't find them anywhere else in the city because they are meant to represent all of the lost or destroyed tombstones from that time. You might have also noticed how the sidewalk rises and dips in certain locations. And that's those dead bodies right underneath our feet, decaying and shifting the dirt. I'll let that information sink in. Now there are a few more frightening facts I'd like to tell you about this place, but I want to do so over the front.
It's the tour guide. He reminds me of the Tower of Terror. One time I was gonna ride it in Hollywood Studios, and I go, "Damn, Tower of Terror!" And one of the cast members goes, "Yes, the rates are always falling." They talk like this.
Much larger than it is today. This one was donated back in 1913 by the Daughters of the American Revolution to honor all of the Revolutionary War heroes who are buried here. And if y'all do decide to journey into the cemetery during the day, then you will find that there are around 600 tombstones. However, in reality, there are around 11,000 bodies buried here. Now, the reason for this discrepancy can be explained in a number of ways. The first are these crypts, these large brick structures scattered throughout the cemetery. They go about 4 to 5 feet below ground and a few feet above ground, and on the inside, on either side, they have shelving to lay the dead bodies onto. Now, these are family burial units, and as such, they each had their own family crypt keeper. Now, these guys, they dealt with all things crypt, but probably their most disgusting job was when a family member was newly deceased. They would have to crawl into these crypts, find the most rotted and decayed family member, take their bodies off of the shelf, start breaking their bones up into little itty-bitty pieces to put into a bone box to store at the bottom of the crypt. And that is when they would take the newly deceased and place them onto the shelf. So, suffice to say, if you were your family's crypt keeper, you probably were not liked all that much by your family. Now, the second way that we can explain this discrepancy is because of that dreaded yellow fever. See, back night is that of coma. Because whether they were too afraid to check if you were all the way dead, or perhaps they just didn't have the proper tools at the time to make sure. Many of the people that were buried in this mass burial pit were not dead, but instead only comatose. Now, rest assured, they were probably going to die anyway. There was really no saving you back then if you were that far along into the disease. But still, it was probably an extremely rude awakening. Now, the last way that we can explain this discrepancy is because back in the discrepancy between the tombstones and the bodies is because back in 1864, William Sherman marched his army down here, and he set up his base camp here in the cemetery. He brought along with him thousands of troops and hundreds of horses. And because this was a relatively small area for all that, the horses didn't really have a lot of room to walk around and stretch in, so they would end up kicking over and destroying a lot of these tombstones.
So that cemetery behind us is very famous in Savannah. Been there like 2 or 3 times. Really primarily the most famous because if you check my Instagram, Into the Danny, you'll see that hundreds of American Revolutionary soldiers are buried there. Look at this little hearse. It's a tour on a hearse. That's why you gotta be careful here, man. Gotta be careful filming. Oh boy. Look at that, that's funny. That's a funny tour. All right. Making our way, I think, now to our last stop, I think. So, let's see. We got a cool toy shop here, real quick. It's Lord of the Rings there, I believe. Boy Leonardo right here. So, according to our tour guide, it is this is a hotel that's haunted with Union soldiers. Yeah, a lot of them, when they were wounded in battle, they had to get surgery here, and you know, you can imagine how horrific it was. All right, that's gonna do it. The scariest tour in the most haunted city in the United States. That was pretty good. Got a lot of cool stories. I'm really tired. I've had a very long day. So, guys, thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.